first time it happened, I shrugged it off. Just one of those weird things, I thought. You know, the feeling when you swear you've been somewhere before, done something before, or met someone before, and yet, it's impossible. But then, it happened again, and by the fourth time, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. It started on a Tuesday. I was running late, as usual, for an important meeting. The train was packed, people jostling for space, the usual hum of commuters all around me. As I stood by the door, I looked out the window, my reflection blending with the passing landscape. That's when it hit me, this exact moment. The same train, the same faces, the same harsh fluorescent light overhead. It was as if I had stepped into a memory, except it was more than just remembering. I knew what would happen next. The sudden screech of the train's brakes, the man coughing behind me, the exact way the woman in the yellow jacket would adjust her scarf. Every single detail was familiar. I blinked and looked around. Nobody else seemed to notice. The train rattled forward as usual, people lost in their thoughts, their phones, or their own lives. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had already lived this moment. When the train reached my stop, I felt the pressure of it again, the overwhelming certainty that I'd done this before. But I walked out, shaking off the thought, trying to convince myself it was just a fluke. I mean, everyone gets Deja Vu from time to time, right? I arrived at the office, trying to push the unsettling feeling to the back of my mind. But it followed me. I sat down at my desk, and there it was again. The feeling of familiarity, the conversation with my colleague about the meeting, the way she'd nod as I spoke, the exact pause before she responded, even the way the fluorescent lights flickered overhead just for a second, was something I knew would happen. I couldn't keep ignoring it. Later that afternoon, I walked down the hallway to the conference room for my meeting. The moment my hand touched the door handle, it happened again, the sensation of having already walked this path, seen this door, and heard the same voices behind it. I stood there for a moment. My mind screamed at me to just open the door, to continue with the meeting, to ignore the gnawing unease that wrapped around my chest. But then, I heard it, a voice familiar, yet distant. It was my own. A whisper, barely audible, yet somehow perfectly clear. You're not supposed to be here. I froze. I felt the blood drain from my face as the world around me spun. My heart pounded in my chest as my hand gripped a door handle, but I couldn't bring myself to turn it. Something inside me knew that if I opened that door, everything would change. I don't know how long I stood there, trapped in the moment. I wanted to turn around, to leave, but my feet were rooted to the spot. The voice was there again, only louder this time. You've done this before. I staggered back, my hands trembling, and fled. I didn't even know where I was going, just away from that hallway, away from that voice, away from the feeling that I was slipping into some kind of parallel nightmare. I ran out of the building, the world around me blurring. The streets were full of people, their lives flowing like a river, everyone unaware of the storm inside me. But I knew I couldn't stop, not until I figured out what was happening. The world felt wrong off, somehow, like I was living in someone else's dream. The eerie feeling of deja vu was everywhere. As I walked home that evening, I passed by the same alley I always do. But tonight, something was different. The shadows seemed longer. The wind blew colder than usual, making my skin crawl. I turned to walk faster, but then I heard a sound, a soft, faint scratching, like something was dragging across the pavement. I stopped dead in my tracks. The scratching grew louder, closer. My heart skipped a beat as I slowly turned around. Nothing. There was nothing behind me. But the air felt thick with unease, like something was watching me. I quickened my pace, but the feeling didn't go away. The sense of familiarity was suffocating, like the world had already played out in front of me, and I was simply following along, powerless to change anything. By the time I reached my apartment, I was shaking, my mind spiraling in circles. I locked the door behind me, trying to steady my breath. I needed to figure out what was going on. I opened my laptop, searching for any explanation, but all I found were articles about deja vu, nothing that made any sense. I was looking for answers, but nothing seemed real. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, its sound a constant rhythm that grew louder with each passing second. And then, it happened again. That voice, it was there, as clear as day, in the silence of my apartment. You're not supposed to be here. I stood up quickly, my breath shallow and quick. I turned toward the voice, but the apartment was empty, silent. My own reflection in the window stared back at me, my eyes wide, frantic. I had to get out. I had to stop whatever this was. I ran outside again, desperate to escape the weight of the world pressing in on me. But everything felt wrong. The people on the street, familiar strangers, were walking past me like they had before. The same jogger, the same man with a dog, the same woman carrying groceries. I felt like I was trapped in a loop, with no way out. The Deja Vu was suffocating. Every moment felt rehearsed, like I was just a puppet being dragged through the motions of a life I couldn't T-control. Was I stuck? Was I reliving my life over and over again? I didn't know, and it terrified me. I tried to scream, to beg for someone to help me, but the words wouldn't come. The world around me spun faster until it all collapsed into a blur of faces, sounds, and feelings. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I woke up the next morning in my bed, drenched in sweat. The room was still. I looked around, unsure of what was real anymore. But one thing was certain. The feeling of deja vu hadn't gone away. In the mirror, I saw my reflection. I had been here before. This wasn't my first time, and it wouldn't be my last. The loop had begun again. I don't know exactly when it started, or even why, but it's been happening more often lately. It's this creeping sensation, this unease that claws at the edges of my mind, as if everything I'm experiencing, every moment, has already played out before. I try to brush it off, chalking it up to stress or lack of sleep. But no matter how hard I try, I can't shake the feeling that I'm living in a memory. It started on a Thursday evening. I was heading home from work, exhausted from the week's demands. The streets were busy with people, the usual city chaos around me. I walked to my usual bus stop, and when I glanced up at the bus schedule, something strange happened. I knew what the next bus would say before I even read it. It wasn't like I had memorized the schedule. It was like I was reading from a script, like I was already familiar with every detail. The bus came right on time, and as I stepped on, I noticed a man sitting near the back. He was wearing a worn-out coat, his head down, his face hidden by a hood. I didn't think much of it at first, but the moment I saw him, a chill ran down my spine. Something about him felt familiar. His presence gnawed at me, and I felt an inexplicable urge to avoid eye contact. I took a seat by the window, staring out at the passing city, trying to clear my mind. That's when it happened again. The voice, it wasn't loud, more like a whisper, but I heard it clear as day. "You've been here before." I froze, my breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, the world around me seemed to blur, everything spinning in slow motion. I couldn't tell if I had actually heard the voice, or if it was just in my head, but it felt real. I looked around nervously, but no one seemed to notice. Everyone was lost in their own worlds. The man in the back was still there, but now he was staring at me, his hood slightly raised, his eyes piercing. I couldn't break the stare. It was like some magnetic pull. And then it happened again. "You've done this before." The words were clearer this time, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My heart started to race, and the feeling of deja vu flooded my mind, suffocating me. I felt like I was trapped in a loop, a moment repeating itself, and I couldn't figure out why. Was this some strange glitch in time? Some twisted part of my mind playing tricks on me? The bus jerked to a stop, and I snapped out of the daze. I quickly stood up and made my way to the exit, desperate to escape the oppressive feeling that had taken hold of me. But when I stepped off the bus, something stopped me in my tracks. The street, the people, the sounds, it was all too familiar. I had seen this scene before. I couldn't place it, but it was like I had been standing in this exact spot, at this exact moment, 1,000 times before. I shook it off, my mind racing. I was just tired, right? That's all. This was just exhaustion playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something was off. I could feel it in my bones. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the events of the day replaying in my mind. I couldn't escape the feeling that I had lived this day, these moments, already. The bus ride, the man in the coat, the voice whispering in my ear. But why? Why was this happening to me? I couldn't explain it, couldn't rationalize it. All I knew was that I was terrified. The next day, it happened again. I woke up to the same routine: coffee, a quick shower, and the same dreary walk to work. But as soon as I entered the office, I felt it again. The deja vu, the overwhelming certainty that everything was exactly the same as the day before. The same people at their desks, the same conversations, the same sounds. I knew what everyone would say before they said it, and it made my stomach twist. I tried to shake it off, to push through, but it was like the world was closing in on me. Every movement, every gesture felt real. The air in the office felt thick, suffocating, like I was trapped in some kind of endless cycle, and there was no way out. By lunch, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked out of the building, needing fresh air, needing to clear my head. I didn't care where I was going, as long as it was far from that feeling. But as I walked down the sidewalk, the voice came again. "You know this place." I stopped dead in my tracks. The street in front of me was the same as before, and I felt the eerie pool of deja vu creeping back into my mind. I didn't know what was happening, but I had to find out. I couldn't stand the feeling of being trapped in my own life, reliving the same moments over and over. I followed the same path I had walked so many times before, feeling the familiar weight of the air on my skin. It felt like I was walking in someone else's shoes, as if this was all scripted, and I was just following along. I didn't know where I was going, but it didn't matter. The street, the people, the shops, they were all part of the loop. The same, unchanging loop. And then, I saw him again, the man in the coat, standing by the street corner, watching me. His eyes locked onto mine, and the world seemed to stop. Time stretched out, and I knew deep down I had seen him before. I had known him before. The voice echoed in my mind. "You're not supposed to be here." I rushed towards him, the fear building in my chest. But before I could reach him, he disappeared into the crowd, vanishing like a ghost. I stood there, breathless, my heart pounding in my ears. I had seen him. I had known him. And then I realized I had seen this moment before. Every detail, every second of it. I had lived this day again and again, trapped in a loop I couldn't escape. It wasn't just deja vu, it was something far worse, something much darker. As I stood frozen in the street, I realized the truth. The loop would never end. I had been living this nightmare, repeating the same day, over and over, and no matter what I did, I couldn't escape it. The man in the coat had been there all along, watching, waiting, and now he had me. It's strange how time plays tricks on your mind. You think you know the path you're on, that the road ahead is clear, but then something happens, something small, almost imperceptible. It starts off as a fleeting thought, a nagging feeling, and before you know it, it takes hold of you completely. That's what happened to me. I was sitting in a cafe one afternoon, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, trying to kill time before my meeting. The coffee was too hot, the steam rising in thick curls. The place was warm and cozy, the clinking of cups and the murmur of voices around me making it feel like any other ordinary day. But then it hit me, a wave of dread, a flash of recognition. I had been here before, in this very spot, at this very table. At first I thought it was just a trick of my mind. Maybe I had come to this cafe countless times before, and this was simply a moment of deja vu. But the more I looked around, the more I realized how wrong I was. It wasn't just the cafe, it was the moment itself. Everything was exactly as it had been the last time I sat here. From the barista behind the counter to the couple sitting by the window, everything felt eerily familiar, down to the smallest detail. I looked down at my phone again, and the same notification popped up. The exact same one as before. My heart skipped a beat as I tapped on the message. "You have a meeting in 15 minutes. I glanced at the clock, and sure enough, the time matched. But how could that be? I had just gotten here. I hadn't been in this cafe for hours. A chill ran down my spine. I pushed my phone away and looked around again, my mind racing. The laughter of the couple at the window, the clinking of cups, everything was repeating itself, like I was stuck in a loop, as if the world was on a loop, and I had been pulled back into it, forced to live this moment again. But it wasn't just deja vu. It was as though I had seen this moment before now, experienced it, lived it, and now, here I was, trapped, doomed to relive it. I stood up abruptly, knocking over my coffee cup. The liquid splashed across the table, dripping down onto the floor. I quickly apologized to the staff, but their faces were blank, indifferent. I had never seen them before, yet somehow, they looked so familiar. They looked at me like I was a stranger in my own life. I was starting to feel dizzy. The walls of the cafe felt like they were closing in on me. I rushed outside, needing air, needing to clear my head. The street outside was the same as before, but the more I looked, the more I realized it wasn't just the cafe. It was the entire world. Everything felt rehearsed, as if I was walking through a dream I had already had. The same people were walking by, the same cars driving past, the same lampposts lining the street. The more I looked, the more the sense of dread grew. It wasn't until I passed the old bookstore that the full weight of it hit me. There, standing outside the door, was a man. He was tall, dressed in a dark coat, his face hidden beneath the brim of his hat. He was looking directly at me. No, not looking, staring. His eyes bored into mine, cold and hollow. I froze, a wave of nausea washing over me. I had seen this man before. I knew I had, but I couldn't place when and why was he staring at me like that. My pulse quickened, and I turned away quickly, my steps quickening as I rushed down the street, desperate to escape the suffocating feeling that had settled in my chest. But the farther I walked, the more I realized I couldn't outrun it. Every step, every turn was familiar, like I had already walked this path, like I was always meant to be here. And that is when it hit me, what if I wasn't just living the same day over again? What if I was trapped in a cycle, forced to live the same moments, over and over, like some cruel game? I glanced at my phone again. The time hadn't changed. It was still the same as it had been when I first sat down in the cafe. The same notification about the meeting, the same time on the clock, the same people, the same street, the same everything. I was stuck in a moment, unable to escape. I stopped dead in my tracks, my chest tight with panic. What if I wasn't just reliving the day? What if something more sinister was at play here? What if I was being watched, controlled by some unseen force that had trapped me in this never-ending loop? I could feel my mind unraveling, my thoughts spiraling into chaos. I had to get out. I had to break free. I ran down the street, not caring where I was going, just needing to escape the cycle. I turned the corner, gasping for breath, only to find myself back at the cafe. The same place, the same moment, the same man standing outside the bookstore, watching me. It was like a switch had been flipped. I realized then that I couldn't escape. No matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, I would always be here, trapped in this loop. The man in the dark coat stepped toward me, slowly, deliberately. His face was still hidden beneath the brim of his hat. But I knew he had been watching me all along. Watching me repeat the same day. Watching me break apart. And then, just as I reached out, hoping for some kind of release, the world went dark. I woke up, gasping for air. The room was dark. I sat up, my hands trembling. My phone was on the bedside table, its screen glowing faintly. I reached for it, my heart pounding, and checked the time. It was the same time as before. The cycle had begun again. It started innocently enough, like any other morning. I was running late for work, my usual routine falling apart in the chaos of an overcrowded subway. The station was packed with people, the sound of footsteps echoing off the walls, the sharp scent of sweat mixing with the stale air. As usual, I was rushing, trying to avoid the collision of tired commuters and the chaos of a train delay. When the train finally pulled in, I rushed to the doors and boarded. It wasn't crowded this time, at least not as much as usual, but still. I found myself standing in the middle of the aisle, clutching the metal pole for support. I looked around at the faces, the same ones I saw every day, but today, something was different. It wasn't a sudden shift, nothing obvious. But something about the air felt heavier, like the whole scene had been suspended in time, waiting for something to happen. I shifted on my feet, glancing toward the exit doors of the train. But as I did, I realized something. I had seen this moment before. I blinked, shaking my head. I couldn't have. It was just a feeling, just a strange sensation that happened from time to time. But this was more than that. I could remember everything. The exact position of the woman sitting by the window, the man in the brown coat reading the same newspaper, the same dull hum of the train as it glided through the tunnels. It was like a memory of the future, a sensation of having already lived this exact moment. I looked up at the next stop, knowing it would be the same as the last. Sure enough, the train slowed, the doors opened with a dull hiss, and a few people stepped off. I stood frozen for a moment, my eyes wide, my heart beating faster than it should have been. I knew what would happen next. The doors would close, the train would move, but the sensation of deja vu gripped me tighter. The moment passed quickly, and I tried to shake off the unease. I focused on the gentle sway of the train, the repetitive thrum of the wheels beneath me, but it was no use. The feeling kept creeping back, inching its way under my skin. I knew it wasn't just this moment. It was the whole day. The entire day was already mapped out in my mind, like a shadow of the future that had already been cast. When I stepped off the train, I moved through the crowd like a ghost, each step feeling real. Everything was exactly as it should be. The woman with the yellow scarf, the businessman adjusting his tie, the homeless man with his cardboard sign. Every face was a piece of a puzzle I had already seen, and the air around me buzzed with the weight of it. I arrived at work, but nothing felt right. The office was quieter than usual. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the sound of the elevator doors opening, the soft clicking of keyboards severing was the same, but it was wrong. Every detail, from the position of the receptionist's desk to the way my coworker sipped her coffee, felt like I had already seen it. And then it happened again. The voice, the whisper, soft and familiar, echoing in my mind like a warning. This is not your time. I froze in the doorway to my office, my heart pounding in my chest. My head spun. The words were so clear, so real, that they made my blood run cold. My hand shook as I reached for the door handle, but before I could touch it, a wave of dizziness swept over me, and I stumbled back into the hallway. I couldn't breathe. My head was spinning. The world around me had become a blur, slipping through my fingers like sand. And then, as if someone had flipped a switch, the world went silent. No more murmurs of office chatter, no more tapping of keyboards, just complete, suffocating silence. I stumbled into the break room, my pulse quickening, but when I stepped inside, I found that no one was there. The room was empty, the lights flickering as if the power had been cut. I turned toward the fridge, but there was something strange about the reflection in the glass. I couldn't quite place it, but the reflection of my face wasn't single D right? I leaned closer, my breath shallow, and that's when I saw it. In the reflection, behind me, was the man in the brown coat, the same man from the train. His face was just a blur in the mirror, but I knew it was him. I turned quickly, but when I looked behind me, the room was empty. I spun back to the mirror, my pulse racing in my throat, but the man was gone. The reflection was just me, staring back at myself in disbelief. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to shake off the terror clawing in my insides, but it wouldn't leave. I couldn't remember when it started, when the feeling had shifted from a weird coincidence to something deeper. I wasn't just reliving the same day over and over. It wasn't just Deja Vu. It was something else, something far worse, something that I couldn't escape. I turned to leave the break room, but as I stepped back into the hallway, I froze once more. The same man in the brown coat stood at the end of the hall, watching me. His face was still hidden, but his presence was unmistakable. The whisper came again, louder this time, more urgent. You're not supposed to be here. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know how he was connected to this endless loop I seemed to be trapped in. But I knew one thing for sure. I was going to find the answers standing there. I turned and ran, desperate to get out. But every hallway, every exit, led me right back to the same spot. The same man, the same whisper, and then it hit me. The horrifying realization that I couldn't escape. This wasn't just a glitch in time. I had been pulled into something much darker, something that bent time and reality to its will. And no matter how hard I tried, no matter how fast I ran, I would always come back to this moment. You're not supposed to be here. I didn't know if I had ever left this place, or if I ever would. I only knew that the loop had begun again. The first time it happened, I thought I was imagining things. A fleeting moment, a brief sensation, a feeling like I'd been here before. I brushed it off, chalked it up to exhaustion or stress. Life was hectic, after all. Who wouldn't be tired in this fast-paced world? But then it happened again the next day. Same time, same place. I was walking home from work, the sun dipping low behind the skyline, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. The street was as busy as it always was, people rushing past, their footsteps scinting with the dull hum of the city. But this time, it was different. This time, everything felt wrong. I knew exactly what would happen next. I could hear the sound of a car's tires screeching around the corner, the woman in a red jacket walking past me, the distant cry of a child from across the street. It was as if I had already lived this moment. I wasn't surprised by any of it. It felt like I was simply watching a replay of something I had already seen. I paused in my steps, my heart thudding in my chest. Something wasn't right. I had never experienced this before, but here it was, pressing against me, suffocating me with its strange familiarity. My breath caught in my throat as I took another step, then another, my feet moving mechanically, like I was on autopilot, following a path I had already walked. When I reached the corner, I stopped again. A sudden wave of dizziness hit me, making the world blur. The streetlight flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow on the empty road. I reached out to steady myself on a nearby lamppost, my hand trembling. I wasn't sure what was happening. I wasn't sure how to make it stop. And then, it happened. The sound of footsteps behind me, the distinct sound of someone walking in sync with my own steps. I spun around, my pulse racing. There was no one there, just empty space. But the footsteps didn't stop. They were still there, moving in perfect rhythm with my own. I took a step forward, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination, but the footsteps didn't stop. They followed me, each one in perfect sync with my own. I turned quickly, but there was still no one there. It was like the air itself had become a prison, and I was trapped inside it. Every movement, every second, felt like a replay, like I was stuck in a never-ending loop. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just some trick of my mind. Something more sinister was happening, something I couldn't explain. I walked faster, trying to outrun the sensation, but no matter how quick I moved, the footsteps never ceased. The pounding of my heart became deafening, drowning out everything else around me. I could feel the sweat on my brow, my hands clammy and cold, as though I was suffocating beneath the weight of my own thoughts. By the time I reached my apartment building, I was nearly out of breath, my legs shaky beneath me. I fumbled for my keys, my hands trembling as I shoved them into the lock. The door creaked open, and I hurried inside, slamming it shut behind me. I leaned against the door, trying to steady my breathing. The apartment was dark, quiet, too quiet. I walked through the small entryway, the familiar creak of the floorboards under my feet echoing in the silence. Everything was exactly as it had been when I left that morning. The same furniture, the same mess, the same smell of stale coffee and old books. But it wasn't the same. It couldn't be. I walked into the kitchen, trying to shake off the panic that still gripped my chest. I opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, and took a long gulp. My reflection in the kitchen window caught my eye. For a moment, I thought I saw something move behind me, something shifting in the shadows. I whirled around, but the room was empty. Just my own reflection, pale and wide-eyed, staring back at me. The dread settled deeper in my bones, gnawing at me like an itch. I couldn't scratch. I needed to figure out what was going on. I couldn't keep living like this, caught in the grip of this strange Deja Vu that felt like a shadow stalking me at every turn. That night I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. The feeling followed me into my dreams, haunting me like a memory I couldn't escape. I woke up in the middle of the night, gasping for air, my sheets tangled around me. The room was dark, silent, but I could still hear it, the footsteps. Soft, rhythmic, just beyond the door, moving in perfect time with my own heartbeat. I got up, my feet unsteady beneath me. I stepped cautiously to the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. When I opened it, there was no one there. The hallway was empty, just the quiet hum of the building air's heating system and the faint sound of traffic from the street below. But something was wrong. The air was thick, charged with an unseen presence. I turned back to my apartment, and that's when I saw it. The reflection in the hallway mirror wasn't mine. It was someone else, someone standing just behind me, their face obscured by shadows. I spun around, my breath caught in my throat, but there was no one there. I ran back into the apartment, slamming the door behind me, my heart racing. The reflection had been wrong, the shadow had been wrong, and the footsteps, they hadn't stopped. They were still there, following me, watching me. As I backed into the corner of the room, trying to make sense of it all, I realized the truth. I wasn't stuck in some Deja Vu. I wasn't caught in a loop. I had been here before, but I wasn't supposed to be. I had crossed some invisible line, some boundary I wasn't meant to cross. And whatever had been following me, whatever had been whispering my name, was coming for me now. No matter where I ran, no matter how far I went, it would always be there, lurking just beyond the corner of my eye, waiting. I wasn't just experiencing a memory. I was being watched, trapped in a world that wasn't mine. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they filled the room. And I knew, in that moment, I would never escape them.